I'm Kento Bento.
This video is made possible by CuriosityStream. By signing up at the link in the description, you'll also get Nebula for free, a second video streaming platform that I just so happen to be a part of. Before we start, I just want to apologize if my voice sounds a little rough. I'm actually quite sick, but I really wanted to make this video. So anyway, if you clicked on this, I assume you've already watched the incredible Japanese Prison Break. And as it turns out, many of you had some lingering questions that needed answering. Like, where did all the dirt go? How can anyone break handcuffs with their bare hands? Why didn't anyone see the rust after using the miso soup? How can you add 3 more years to a life sentence? What exactly was Shiratori's initial crime that led to his first arrest? What happened in his life after being released from prison? Was this whole video just an ad, bro? And as a bonus, what's the next Kento Bento video going to be about? We'll get to all of that, but by far the most common question was, where did all the dirt go? So let's start with that. This is the scene in question, the setup for the 4th and final escape. The illustration shows him burrowing straight down beneath the floorboards. But how can that be if there was no place to hide the dirt? Well, this guy thinks the only possible explanation is that he must have eaten it. Others have suggested that Shiratori must have pulled a Shawshank Redemption and over time emptied it in the yard. But as far as I'm aware, he was in isolation at all times, so that's probably not what happened. No, the answer is actually pretty simple. Just as with most building structures, the foundation of the cell isn't built directly on the surface of the soil, which means there was more than enough room underneath the floorboards for the dirt to fit. And sorry that this wasn't clearly illustrated in the drawing, but let's all blame Charlie the illustrator for that. Another common remark was that this video must be fake, since there's no way anyone can break handcuffs with their bare hands. Well, this has all been documented. And of course, what makes this story worth telling in the first place is precisely because it doesn't seem real. But specifically about the handcuffs, remember, these were cuffs from the 1930s in Japan. Breaking them isn't too absurd an idea when you consider, and I'll quote this Reddit user, that Japanese iron at the time wasn't especially pure, mostly deriving from iron sand, which has a ton of impurities. It's likely Shiratori could snap the cuffs along the weak link. And on top of that, we know Shiratori had immense strength, making this all the more plausible. But what about his escape from the 20 kg solid iron handcuffs and leg cuffs after using the salty miso soup? Why didn't anyone notice the rust? Those metalwork guys apparently came every couple weeks or so to remove his cuffs so he could take a bath. By the way, sorry about the maggot shot. So why didn't they see anything? Well, the rusting was intentionally made obvious in the illustrations to demonstrate clearly what was going on. That was my call. But in reality, it wasn't so visible. And the way the specialist removed the cuffs every few weeks was by breaking apart the actual metal. So they never actually paid too much attention to the screws and bolts. Okay, so this one was kind of surprising to me. Quite a few people asked, how could there be 3 more years added to a life sentence, as was the case for Shiratori after his second escape? No, this wasn't a mistake in the script, nor does it mean that the prison keeps the corpse 3 years after death. Rather, the answer is that a life sentence is not what you think it is. A life sentence or life imprisonment can mean, yes, inmates remain in prison for the rest of their natural lives. But it could also mean for a fixed period of time, or until they are paroled. In 1930s Japan, I believe this period was at least 10 years. Nowadays, it's increased to about 35 years. And this may also help you understand how some criminals can be given multiple life sentences, like 2 or 3 or even 10 for the more severe crimes. Or, as the case with Terry Nichols, an accomplice in the Oklahoma City bombing, 161 consecutive life sentences. Okay, then what exactly was Shiratori's initial crime? The one that got him imprisoned in the first place? This was asked a lot in the comments too, even though I actually addressed it at the very beginning of the video. Prisoner Yoshie Shiratori had had enough. He was forced to confess to a murder he did not commit. But just to elaborate on this, Shiratori had a rough upbringing after his father died and his mother abandoned him at the age of 2. And he later found himself involved with a bad crowd, or seemingly some sort of gang, which may explain how he developed such skills as lockpicking, handcuff breaking, and prison parkour. Now, it was apparently these people who were the ones responsible for committing the murder, not Shiratori, but he made the mistake of tagging along. After they were all arrested, what happened was that the group turned on him and claimed he was in fact the murderer. and along with the police beating a false confession out of him, became the fall guy, and he was quickly convicted. Now that's apparently the story, but the circumstances surrounding this was too ambiguous for the courts, which is why he was still sentenced to 20 years at the end, as in he was cleared of the farmer's murder, a legitimate case of self-defense, but not the initial murder. So all that was what led to the events at the start of the video. As for what happened to him 28 years later after being released from Fuchu prison, by the way, this was the same prison that was referenced in the 300 million yen robbery that I covered in the Japanese bank heist video, a famous heist that took place 7 years after Shiratori was released from prison. I already touched on this a little with him meeting his daughter, which was a nice note to end the video on, but according to some sources, it appears, unfortunately, that his relationship with her was somewhat strained, which isn't all that surprising considering the stigma in Japan of having a relative in prison, and her never actually meeting him before. So after his release, yes, he was happy to see her, but he later ended up bouncing around Japan doing odd jobs in various cities, mainly construction work. And actually, why don't I play you the alternative ending that wasn't shown on YouTube, but only on the Nebula streaming platform. Just 14 years later, in 1961, he was released on parole, and for the first time in a long time, he was truly a free man. He decided to head back to Aomori, where it all began, and meet up with his daughter, who, by this point, unfortunately, was the only family member he had left. For his incredible escapes, Yoshie Shiratori became a legend, an anti-hero in Japanese popular culture, read about in books and depicted in movies. And even though Shiratori passed away in 1979 at the age of 71, his legacy lives on, perhaps the most, in the one place he wanted to leave more than any other, Abashiri Prison. Or at least what has now become the Abashiri Prison Museum, where Shiratori has been immortalized as a mannequin display simulating his renowned miso soup escape. So I was able to end the video this way, letting the story breathe, because new Kento Bento videos all go up on Nebula completely ad-free. And this actually ties into the second to last question here, one that I see all the time in the comments. Was this whole video just an ad? And that's seemingly a reaction to how I do segues. And of course the answer is no. The sponsor has no say in the topic or script. I just work really hard to, well, first find a sponsor that I trust, one with a genuinely good product or service, and then somehow relate it to the story of the video. I think most of you by now get the whole tongue-in-cheek, smooth segue thing, but for those who seem to take it all a bit too seriously, I'd highly recommend Nebula, which you can get for free as part of a special deal if you sign up to CuriosityStream in the link below. So, while most of you already know what CuriosityStream is, a subscription streaming service with thousands of high-budget documentaries and non-fiction titles, Nebula is a different beast. It's a streaming platform too, but created by a group of smaller independent creators like Wendover Productions, Polymatter, Real Life Lore, CGP Grey, Kutzgesagt, and somehow this dude. The project is self-funded, not backed by investors, and we've managed to make this ad-free and with no dreaded algorithm. We started Nebula so we could have a place to try out new content ideas that might not work on YouTube, stuff that would likely get demonetized, as well as fun collaborative projects like Working Titles, a series where each episode different creators examine the opening sequence to their favorite TV shows. Polyphonic did Game of Thrones, Patrick H. Willems, one of my favorites, did X-Men, and there's still more to come, like Stranger Things, The Simpsons, and even The purpose of Nebula is not to pull people away from YouTube, but rather the goal is to create a sandbox where we can learn and experiment on our own terms. We've only just started, but if you want to experience and be part of helping us build this unique platform, well, it's now made easier thanks to CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream loves independent creators and wants to help us grow our platform. So they're offering all Kento Bento viewers free access to Nebula when you sign up at curiositystream.com/KentoBento. Of course, by signing up to CuriosityStream alone, you'll get access to thousands of the world's top documentaries like the Mona Lisa Mystery, The Great Train Robbery, The Real War of Thrones, Japan's Samurai Castle, and much more. So unlimited access to both CuriosityStream and Nebula is for a very reasonable $2.99 a month. And even better, by entering the promo code Kento Bento during the sign-up process, your membership will be completely free for the first 30 days. And I don't know how many of you are still watching, but there's one more question to get to, and that's, what's the next Kento Bento video going to be about? Now, I don't like getting ahead of myself and revealing the title, as plans can always change, but I will say it's somewhat Halloween inspired, even though I'll be posting this after Halloween. And of course, it's a true story, as all my videos are, which makes this one all the more fascinating, but also shocking. This story will be set in the Hong Kong-Macau area, and is actually something that has affected me personally since I was a child, but that's all I'll say for now. I don't know if I'll do another one of these follow-up videos. This one just seemed to have a lot of questions, but please do tell me if you like this and want more follow-up content to future videos. I will say, it is nice to be able to express myself in a more relaxed setting for once, and not have to worry about meanderings and going off topic. And on that note, I thought I'd end this video on something completely random and unrelated. Last weekend, I was able to witness in person one of the greatest feats in human history, as Eliud Kipchoge became the first human to break the 2-hour marathon barrier in Vienna with a time of 1 hour 59 minutes and 40 seconds. And here's me filming the finish, and it was crazy and super cool, and just like Yoshie Shiratori, is a true example of what humans are capable of. Thank you for watching. Please support me on Patreon, check out CuriosityStream and Nebula, and I'll see you again in the next Asian-y video.